the first time I heard anything was himself talking in Cannes, talking about, and I thought he was making a joke. He talked, we were doing an interview with Kirsten Dunst, and so for Melancholia, and he said my next film is a porn film with those two, and so I thought he was making fun, and it was quite funny. And then much later on I read the script. Yeah, I just thought it was a joke, and that he was it was a provocation. And I didn't want to put my hopes, I didn't want to hope too much that he was going to ask. The big thing for me was for him that I was realizing that he was asking me to do a third film, and it was such a blessing, and that's the way I always thought about it, that I didn't want it to think about it too much in case it wasn't true. I was very excited and surprised, and I couldn't expect what I was going to read, so it was all a surprise, and yes, of course, quite terrifying. Also, I didn't know when I knew that there would be two of us playing Joe, so I didn't know when I came in. And so, yeah, it was just such a big project to go through, and again, not understanding, as it was the same with Antichrist. I wasn't sure I was getting all the digressions and all the metaphors, and so a lot of the work for me was to understand what both characters were saying, even though Joe doesn't really understand what Seligman is going on about all the time, but still it was interesting for me. And I don't know, it's so rich. It was such a rich script, and so intense. So what can I say? It's just very scary and exciting and, yeah, exhilarating at the same time. And that's what I felt when I saw the film. She uses them, of course, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't have any feeling for them. She just knows what to use them for, what she needs. She's convinced at the beginning that she should get into that little, what's it called, the little flock. And so, yeah, she follows her beliefs until she's stricken by something stronger, which is love. She's not very optimistic towards humankind. So in that sense, well, I don't agree with her, but I do love her very much. I think she becomes, I thought she was touching. It's weird when you've seen yourself in a film, but it's weird talking that way, but she's very defendable.
Tus tráilers, visita mi canal.
I was very, very nervous at first. I was nervous about what I heard on the film, that, I needed it to be very clear that actors were not going to perform sex. So, as long as that was clear, then I was fine. I think I was more disturbed when I did the post-syncing, because when you see just a few images and you suddenly feel that the whole film is just that. And so I was quite scared of the little insights I got into the film. Seeing the film as a whole, I have absolutely no problem, and on the contrary, I think it's part of the film, it's the beauty of the film, it's that it's a film about flesh and the crudity of sex, and it would have been total nonsense to be prude and to, I don't know, hide stuff. So, but I know that Lars said, would you be, how did he put it? He asked me, would I feel, if people believed that I was having sex, was it just to know what my limits were in terms of morale or morality. And I think I'm fine with that, as long as, I know what I've done. It was like being in a different film, but when I see the film, it's not. It's the same film. But on the set, it was a little strange. Just because, because you're using actors just for their sex, and yeah, it becomes very specific. I think I met him when he was in a bad place. I mean, he wasn't very well. He wasn't well, and he got better until now, I think. But he's very mysterious, and it's nice that it stays that way. I think he knows everything about me, physically. And what goes on in my head. I think he reads me like an open book. But I can't read him. And I kind of like I like our relationship. I'm very touched by him, and I think I've said it often, because I felt it was so true with Antichrist, and again with Melancholia, with Kirsten's character, but I feel that he's putting himself into those women characters, and I feel that it makes the characters so legitimate and so true, and the fact that he's a man, it's even better. So I don't know, there's a lot of ambiguity that I really like in those characters, and a lot of depth, and that you can't read anywhere else, I think. With this film, for me, what changed a lot, and I know he's done this in the past, of course, but And it was in Melancholia, a little, at the beginning anyway, but it's the humour. It wasn't there in Antichrist. And in this film, I feel that it's a very important part of the film and the way the story is told. And it's him and his humour, and I think it's great. And you need it I feel that you need it for that story, especially. I think the weirdest for me was having to put on this wound at, I can't remember, 5 a.m. before. I think it took 2 hours to put on. And just standing there with this sweet man, but, working between my legs was really weird. And we were making it as discreet as possible. I mean, I could hide myself and stick things myself so that he wouldn't see things that I didn't want him to see. But in the end, he was still putting his nose there and painting the flesh, and that was the weirdest. Yeah.
I made him a man who had very little experience of life through experience and only through reading, and who tried to use whatever limited imagination he had to understand reality and life. But it's very hard to learn about life from books, because it's so complex, so full of contradictions, and it's very hard to reduce to intelligent sentences, life. That's why we have art, and that's why we have films like Lars. And Lars's films are like all films. They're not best when they're pinpointing something or telling you something very concrete. They're at their best when they're ambiguous and open and strange. Well, he's nice to her. She feels safe, and if you want to hear somebody tell about their lives, they should feel safe, and they should feel that you're interested in them. But I don't think it's calculated that much from his side, because I think he's not socially skilled or really good at manipulating people, because of his, as I said before, lack of real life experience. But he's also a crucial instrument for the digressions in the film, because he takes off talking about fly fishing or how icons are made or stuff like that. So he's responsible for fucking up her story as well. But she gets it out. It's so the form of the film, that it is basically, it is two people sitting in a room for 5 hours talking, but with flashes of backflashes and cuts of other locations as well, and mixed up with Lars's very humoristic way of making his own comments visually on everything. But it's a form that you usually don't see, and that they probably wouldn't recommend at film school. First of all, I love him. We're very good friends. We have a lot of fun when we're working, and it doesn't feel like work to me, because it feels like you start playing with the material and see what can be in it. And you have no responsibility as an actor. You don't have to come and deliver something specific, because the process of shooting with Lars is the process of discovering, which is very nice. And then it's fun to humiliate him and get humiliated by him, and the tone between us is very nice. But basically, I just love being with him. I worked with him with his first feature film after he gave up total control. His first 5 feature films was total control. He designed every movement of the actors and everything, and they were technically brilliant, and he and of course dead. When I saw his first film, Element of Crime, in a festival, I said, I'd like to work with this director when he gets interested in people. And it took him some years, but then he realized it himself, and with The Kingdom, he sort of broke up this total control thing and realized that he could actually get real life on the screen if you let the actors go. And when we did Breaking the Waves, which was a very thought-out script, I called it the Raiders of the Lost Ark in terms of melodrama, because every scene was like the peak scene in a melodramatic film. If he hadn't letting the actors be more free and create more life, you would have felt the structure of it, and then it wouldn't have worked as well. And he spent all those years taking away his own tools. The Dogma Manifesto, it's all about. It's a very personal thing. It's not a manifesto. This is the way films should be made. It's about him taking away his own tools and reducing everything to. Eventually it gets down to all the way to Dogville, which is just a text, an actor, and fucking shoot it. And that's what he did. And when we did Dogville, you see that this story in itself is so strong that it actually works. And then you have actors that bring life to it, and that are not trying to do great performances just to bring life to it. And then you photograph it, and it works. So he has been reducing his tools throughout the years, and then lately he has started using his knowledge again of sort of more traditional filmmaking, and made a beautiful film like Melancholia. And on this film we didn't even have handheld camera. We had tripod and tracking, which was very exotic. So he's constantly moving around in his ways of working as well, to find not only the ultimate way to work for each story, but also to develop his own means. And after having given up all his tools, and he's still in control, of course, because he's doing the editing. But after giving away his tools for many years, he's now bringing them back in. But now without constraining the actors, which is great. Well, they're all different, aren't they? They are so different in style and in. What they all have in common is that they have Lars's writing is in the bottom, and that is how you recognize a Lars film. The dialogue is always like, it's a bit like child talk in a way. He writes. Well, I told him once that when I read your scripts, I think of a highly intelligent but slightly perverted little child that is sitting with a doll's house and snipping the heads of the dolls. And he said yes, and you have that feeling because that's why it's so hard to improvise in his films. He wants you to improvise, but you can't improvise that kind of dialogue because there's a naivete to it. It's a fairy tale tone to it usually that has a certain quality. So all his films have that tone that is not realistic.
Tráilers, visita mi
Then
canal.
they are in style very different from. You could say that Melancholia is one of the more romantic films he's made. You could say that The Idiots is one of the rawer films he's made. You could say that this film is everything that he come up with in his mind. It's like he's painted a canvas with his brain. Whatever association he has and ideas he has, he just threw in there. It's an interesting journey. First of all, what you feel when you see it, it is not pornographic. It's human behavior with body parts that you usually don't see exposed. And it becomes not sexy, it becomes normal behavior. And that is an interesting effect of it, which is very good. The art, it's not artsy-fartsy, but of course the entire film is on... and the universe of the film is elevated to an art level because it's not our everyday world that we see and the everyday characters we see. But it shouldn't be strange to see a dick enter a cunt on film than it is to see a spoon enter a mouth with porridge on. It's a Lars fantasy about a woman with nymphomania, and it's, as always, a story. It's fiction, but it's based in a very human reality. But I also think it's Lars's frustration with a world where there are too many taboos. And where there's too little tolerance in terms of accepting people's deviations in sexual behavior or whatever. My personal idea is if two people enjoy it, then it's fine whatever they do, as long as nobody is sort of forced into something that they do not appreciate. We should be very careful in designing other people's sex life. To me, the sexuality of the film is not controversial at all, but I bet it is in Kabul or Salt Lake City. So it depends on who you are. To me, nudity and sexuality is just some body functions. I don't have the curse of religion that sort of bans certain body parts.
I had just made a movie called Lawless, and found that I really liked that certain kind of energy. There's a certain kind of director, a certain kind of approach. And there's only maybe 20 of these guys in the world, and 5 at the tippy top of the mountain, Lars being at the tippy top of the mountain. And so I knew that he was making a movie. You always hear about things like that. You know who your favorite guys are and what they're doing. But I didn't know specifically what it was. I know that it's a big stretch as a fan of Lars to know, being an actor, a male, there's not a whole lot of opportunity in Lars's films for men. It's actually the opposite, and he's one of the only guys like that, So it wasn't even on my list of dreams, It was one of those things that's so way out there, you don't even dream about it. And then literally, it's a statistic, I guess, but I just got a call from my agent saying there may be an opportunity here in this Lars von Trier movie. And I already knew what it was, and I said, yeah, anything, man, any role, whatever. That was my response to my agent. I didn't know what the role was yet, and then we started getting info, and the first info we got, and I'll never forget this, because my entire team reacted with such a fear, the first request on the production end, not from Lars, but from production, was pictures of my penis. You should ask everybody where they were in their lives when they read it too, because I think it's indicative of whatever the response is. But for me, it was majorly powerful. you know, hearing stuff about lust plus jealousy equals
Y tus trailers.
love was
Visita
probably
mi
the most
canal.
definitive description of love up to that point in my life I'd ever really heard. Just the easiest, simplest, most matter-of-fact way, and it connected with me, and that scared the shit out of me. There was a lot of things in Joe's character that really struck me, you know, like it'll strike most people. You know, it's not, I know it's a very specific character, but the themes are quite generalized, you know, and for me it just hit me quite hard. And I'd been looking for an adversarial role. You know, previously in my life, for my career, I'm always the everyman, or the guy who's like the normal guy stuck in this extraordinary situation that he's got to deal with. And Jerome was an opportunity to play sort of a, you know, slimy, you know, evil fucking, you know, blasphemous mini juggernaut of a man kind of thing. It was like, you know, like Alec Baldwin in Glengarry. You know, when he comes in, he's a tight, every scene that I had read with Jerome were powerful. All the scenes were really visceral, dealing with heavy. And, you know, there's a translation thing too, because he doesn't write in English. It's got to be translated. And so there's things that get lost in translation, you know. Jokes that didn't make sense to me when I read them, where on the day, situationally, it all works. You know, I don't think I understood all of it. I had no idea about the numbers, the numerology, the golden angles, and all this shit. I had no idea. But a lot of it struck me. Now, having just watched the movie, all of it clicks hard, you know, but at the time, none of it made sense. But I trusted Lars implicitly, because his worst shit is better than my best dreams of my best shit. And if you can find a guy who you can implicitly trust, then you're very fortunate in the actor seat, you know? Jerome is found an equal in Joe in a wild way, you know? He's as far away from love as she is, for different reasons. And he's a very insecure man. He's a very vain man. And he's a very small man. Not physically, but small in terms of his ability to empathize with others. And, you know, he's very small-minded, narrow, selfish. The way into the character is, you know, you ask yourself, what about you is pugnacious? What about you is vain? You just turn it all up. You just amplify all of it. So I became quite physical. It became like American Psycho. You know, it became that without the killing. In my head, he was, you know, a lot of tip to Christian Bale in that movie, because a lot of Jerome in my mind was that same kind of neurosis and self-centeredness as a Wall Street broker or something like that, you know? And he had this murky crime backstory history that we never really got into, which opened up a whole Pandora's box for me and my, you know, personal thoughts on the character. This is a dude who was living under the shadow of many men, bureaucrats, and was pushed into a bureaucratic position without any skills that way, you know, had no concept of love early on. You know, the guy has no concept of love. His idea of love is Joe's idea of love, this lust plus jealousy shit, you know, which is just a shadow of actual love, you know. And I don't think he ever really learns it, nor does she. They just, in the end, I mean, when you see the movie, it's not all wrapped up in a bow, you know. They never really find it. He was on my list of the greats, you know, the list of 5 maybe. He's our Tarkovsky. He's the guy, you know. He's and super humble, like can't take a compliment or anything, you know. It's a really wild dichotomy. I feel like if he was super Christian, he'd be like, "Thanks, man. Thanks, I appreciate it." But he's just not that guy. I guess the reputation would be that of a rebel, or like a fucking bank robber. He's like Billy the Kid in the director's community. You know, he's the one guy who can get away with whatever he wants because it's good. You know, there's this list of rules that you have to make a movie, and he never follows them. You know, he's one of the only dudes who's actually inventing things. He's an inventor. I just expected more information, more input, more direction. I just expected a lot of directing. And I just ran into a collaborator who respected my opinion. Somebody had shown him the Sigur Rós video. And, you know, there's only 2 minutes of footage. And I remember he didn't want to watch any movies while he was getting ready to go, even if it meant, you know, studying an actor's work. And then I offered an audition. He didn't want to do that either because because he was respecting me. It was a very strange, like, middle ground. So he asked Anders, and Anders was like, "Yeah, kid's really good," because I had met his son for that kickboxing film that he did, Only God Forgives. And so inadvertently through Refn and Anders, they basically got me a job with Lars because they co-signed the Sigur Rós thing. So basically his producer brought him Sigur Rós, he watches it, he goes, "Yeah, Anders, what do you think?" And Anders goes, "My son just met him. Pretty cool." And Lars goes, "All right, well, send him the letter." And the letter was, you know, "Are you game?" And so I guess the first test was, let's time how long it takes for this motherfucker to send his dick over the internet, you know, and it was like 20 minutes, you know, so they were like, "All right, kid's ready."
I would say, I mean, throughout the film, she evolves a lot, so the part that I took, where all the flashbacks were very different to the part that Charlotte had done. And we hadn't really talked about who Jo is or how she is because, I mean, in my mind, you know, you're never the same when you're 15 or when you're 30 and then 40. So it's difficult to play the same character all the time. And so that was really interesting to not have to think of matching what Charlotte thought Jo was. Because in my mind, she was still discovering a lot of things, and she was learning what she believed in and what she thought was right and what she thought was wrong, and having her own sort of code of etiquette. Because that's my experience that I had with her. And she became much more decisive and strong in who she was later on, and with Jerome and Marcel. And then it switches to Charlotte, but that's a different Jo. I think she's very curious about her sexuality because she knows that it's something very young. She knows that it's something important to her, but she doesn't quite know how important it is and how to honor that importance. And she discovers it through B on the train and all these experiences. She becomes more assured, and so she develops this sort of, I don't know, kind of hardcore opinions about, you know, she's going to go this far to get what she wants, and she's very opinionated. That's it. And yeah. I mean, I still have moments where I don't really know who she is because it's sort of a never-ending discovery. I mean, I'd be on set and it would come, like, you'd be in a scene and it would hit me and I'm like, oh, this is how she feels. This is who she is. And it was just, yeah, really interesting. Her relationship with Jerome starts off sort of, he's just is a sort of utility at first. He's a way of getting what she wants, and it's a solution, and he later becomes her boss. And and they end up having a relationship together, which I think she hopes will work, but deep down knows that it's not, because she's so driven. But she tries. And it's even though she loves him throughout the movie, it's not going to deter her from, you know, having relationships with other people and going out. And so it's a difficult one because it's not so obvious, because she goes against it and she's against love. So that relationship's quite interesting, and it develops as well through time. At first, when they meet originally, they just sort of have sex and she doesn't really think much of him. But then it escalates and he becomes this obsession and this sort of man that she wants to possess and touch and feel, and she gets it. And then somehow it's not enough.
Visita mi canal.
She does start off, I think, you know, wanting to be part of a group and wanting to be part of something that they all believe in collectively. And then she realizes that her drive is stronger than the other girls and becomes separated from that, and through that she grows up much more individual and much more focused on her needs and her wants, and completely dissociates herself from groups and people. And she ends up kind of almost proud of who she is, and she's not going to be ashamed of wanting to have sex, and it's a celebration for her. So, it's sort of a discovery. Yeah. One of the things I realised with Lars is that all the actors that he's worked with, I think he knows that they will bring something in line with the characters or in line with what he wants to see. And so he just gives them a freedom to do that, rather than kind of putting a cage down a character and letting the actor only pace around that cage. And he's very patient. And he's very precise in his sort of freedom style, I think, because he won't stop until he has that exact millisecond, but he won't tell you how to get to the millisecond. It's sort of you to discover that. It's absolutely incredible what you can do now with special effects, because I mean, I clearly know I didn't have sex, but it bloody looks like I am, and it's even convinced me, so it's just incredible. We would sometimes do the scene before, and then they would film it with the porn doubles, and then, or they would shoot it with the porn doubles, because they needed to see which position worked best for the camera, which is best to do with the porn doubles because they just don't care as much as I would do. And then I would have to go in and copy the position, and it was incredibly technical. I mean, it's people like, but you're going to get aroused. And I'm like, no, this is the least arousing situation I've ever been in, because someone's telling you to move your tiny finger an inch higher because that's where the girl had it, and you've got all these dots on your body, and I mean, it's so mechanical and technical that you almost forget that they're going to superimpose your things, because you're like, is this really going to work? I mean, it's just black dots on my skin and in a position, but somehow it does work, so hats off to them. He wants it to be ugly, and he wants it to be real, because that's what it really is, isn't it, in the end of the day? It can be ugly and it can be quite raw. And I think, I mean, it works as well because it's Lars and he has that peculiar style and yeah, it's a tricky one. But I think by making it so real, it completely works. Making it quite ugly and kind of in your face, I think it's a good thing because it doesn't become a porn movie. And I think that's what people might be quite shocked about, is that it's not a porn movie. I mean, I don't know who watched it and who got aroused. I didn't. So, I mean, I don't watch porn, so I don't know. I mean, it's weird that you shoot a scene and then suddenly it becomes a porn set. And the whole vibe of the thing changes. And I've never been on a porn set. And suddenly you're there and the porn actors are doing what they do and you just realise maybe it's good to just leave the room. And yeah, because people are like, oh, Stacey, you know, you're playing the Nymphomaniac, you should be used to this. I'm like, no, hell no. I'm just going to go outside and have a coffee, let you do the whole porn thing. So that was quite strange, because it just switches. There's not like a, you know, it's almost like a schizophrenic set. It's like doing a film set, doing a porno. And then, I mean, talking about prosthetics, having prosthetics, you know, spending 5 hours getting a fake vagina glued on is pretty interesting, and I don't think that's ever going to happen again.